You're burning documents when the first call comes in. Not shredding. Burning. The flames curl the edges of a shell company agreement you drafted 3 years ago, back when this was just creative compliance. Back when you could still pretend you were a lawyer servicing complicated clients instead of the architect of a criminal empire's legal immortality. Your phone vibrates again. 3 words from a secure number. They took Ricardo. You don't react. Because reacting is what civilians do. You close the steel burn box. Adjust your cufflinks. Check your reflection in the dark window of your office overlooking downtown. You built this skyline. Not with cranes. With contracts. And now the prosecution thinks they can flip your star witness. They don't understand something. Ricardo doesn't scare you. Because you're the one who made him untouchable. Or so you thought. You weren't born into blood money. You earned your way here. Top of your class. Law review. Federal clerkship. Offers from white shoe firms that would have paid you 6 figures to argue about intellectual property and corporate mergers. But that bored you. You didn't want safe money. You wanted leverage. Then you met him. The boss. He didn't threaten you. Didn't wave guns. Didn't act like a movie villain. He talked about supply chains. About territory expansion. About vertical integration. He said, I don't need a criminal lawyer. I need a strategist. That word did it. Strategist. You weren't going to defend crime. You were going to optimize risk. So you restructured his organization. Layered LLCs across 3 states. Established offshore trusts. Built a charitable foundation that funneled community grants while washing operational cash. You created insulation, captains who never met the boss. Couriers who didn't know the product. Managers who only saw numbers. You turned a cartel into a corporation. You turned violence into paperwork. And the money? It came fast. Faster than any legitimate partner track ever could. Private schools for your kids. A penthouse titled under a blind trust. Political donations that bought you judges who owed favors without knowing why. You told yourself you weren't part of the blood. You were just legal infrastructure. Every empire needs one. The first time someone died because of a clause you drafted, you didn't sleep. A mid-level distributor got sloppy. Started skimming. You inserted a loyalty enforcement policy into the operating agreement, coded language that meant discipline. You thought discipline meant demotion. It meant a shallow grave. The boss called you the next day. Your structure worked. No leaks. He sounded proud. Like you'd won a case. You poured yourself a drink that night and told yourself something important. If you didn't design the system, someone dumber would. Someone reckless. You were making it cleaner. More controlled. Less chaotic. You weren't causing harm. You were minimizing it. That lie became your lullaby. Soon you were drafting NDAs for girlfriends who saw too much. Coaching lieutenants before grand jury appearances. Prepping the boss for televised charity galas where he shook hands with mayors who pretended not to see the body count behind his smile. You weren't just protecting him. You were shaping him. Advising which rivals to negotiate with. Which politicians to fund. Which neighborhoods to invest in. Your billable hours became strategic war councils. You stopped thinking like a lawyer. You started thinking like consigliere. The day the federal task force announced a multi-state investigation, you didn't panic. You smiled. Because you had been preparing for this for years. Every property under layered ownership. Every phone call routed through cutouts. Every asset protected by attorney-client privilege. You controlled the narrative. When agents raided warehouses, they found leased spaces tied to shell managers. When they subpoenaed financial records, they hit non-profit entities that passed audits with flying colors. When they tried to flip captains, those captains had never met the boss. You were the firewall. And everyone knew it. The boss started deferring to you in meetings. Not asking. Deferring. You advised against a violent retaliation that would have drawn heat. You proposed expanding into crypto laundering instead of cash-heavy fronts. You suggested backing a city council candidate who later influenced zoning decisions that conveniently benefited your real estate investments. You weren't just cleaning money. You were shaping policy. At dinner parties, judges laughed at your jokes. Bank executives returned your calls immediately. You were untouchable. Because you never touched the product. Never carried a weapon. Never set foot in a warehouse. Your hands were clean. Legally. And that's all that mattered. It started with arrogance. It always does. You believed your own myth. When Ricardo, the operations chief, started getting sloppy, you thought you could manage him like a liability on a balance sheet. You coached him personally. Met him more often. Created new contingency agreements with clauses so intricate they'd confuse any prosecutor. But proximity breeds exposure. You were on calls you shouldn't have been on. You reviewed numbers you didn't need to see. You inserted yourself deeper into operations because you believed only you could fix it. Then the wiretaps came. Not on the boss. On Ricardo. And Ricardo talked too much. Not about shipments. About meetings. About legal strategy. About you. The task force shifted focus. They stopped chasing street-level arrests. They started building a conspiracy case. And conspiracy doesn't care if you never touched the drugs. It cares if you furthered the enterprise. Which you did. Brilliantly. You felt the shift in the room before anyone said it. The boss stopped deferring. Started watching you. Because now you weren't just his shield. You were a potential liability. And in your world, liabilities get eliminated. Ricardo's arrest wasn't the problem. His wife was. She didn't grow up in this life. Didn't understand the code. When agents showed her pictures, bank statements, school photos of her kids walking into class, she folded. Ricardo followed. And attorney-client privilege? It doesn't protect you when the client waives it. The indictment drops on a Tuesday. 43 pages. Your name appears 72 times. Co-conspirator. Legal architect. Strategic advisor to a criminal enterprise. They paint you not as a lawyer, but as the brain. The one who transformed chaos into scalable crime. The one who made violence profitable. You call the boss. It goes to voicemail. You try again. Nothing. By nightfall, you hear he's stepping back. Distancing himself. Letting it be known you acted independently. That you were overzealous. That you built structures he didn't fully understand. You almost laugh. You taught him those structures. But power protects itself. And you taught him that too. Federal agents knock at 6:12 a.m. Professional. Polite. They let you put on a suit. As they cuff you, you notice something absurd. The craftsmanship of the metal. Precise. Engineered. Just like your contracts. In the interrogation room, they slide evidence across the table. Emails. Recorded calls. Financial trails. They don't yell. They don't threaten. They just explain the sentencing guidelines. Decades. Your law license revoked. Your assets frozen. Your name permanently attached to the empire you thought you controlled. And here's the part that finally cracks you. The boss has already retained new counsel. A younger attorney. Hungry. Ambitious. He'll argue you acted alone. That you manipulated the organization. That you were the rogue strategist who went too far. And it will work. Because you designed the structure to protect the top at all costs. You built a system where blame flows downward. And now gravity is doing its job. You sit in your holding cell that night replaying every clause you ever drafted. Every loophole. Every layer of insulation. You realize something brutal. You were never outside the violence. You just monetized it. You told yourself you were smarter than the criminals. But you became the most dangerous one. Because you gave chaos a business model. And business models scale. Now the empire continues without you. Leaner. More cautious. Using the exact legal framework you engineered. Your replacement will tweak it. Improve it. Optimize it. Just like you did. Because there will always be someone who believes they can dance close enough to the fire without burning. You almost admire the elegance of it. Your greatest professional achievement is the machine that made you disposable.